Welcome back to Kings of the Tiki Hut. Doug Lesmerises in South Florida. Bill Landis in Dallas. Landis, this is your show. This is our big game breakdown on Ohio State, Texas. I'm just going to nod. I might swim during the show. I'm going to cover the Penn State Notre Dame Orange Bowl this evening, but you are embedded with the Buckeyes and the Longhorns. We're going to break down Ohio State, Texas on both sides of the ball. We're going to make our picks for this game. We have Tyler Shoemaker joining us later in the show to make his best bets for both semifinals. I chime in a little bit on that. So if you're not used to our betting coverage, you're going to get a little bit of that at the end of the show. But we want to start off, Landis, with vibes. There's finally some vibes there because people showed up last night, players and coaches who are actually partaking in this game.
Sorry,
Hello?
I lost you there. I'm there. I lost you there for a second.
You lost me there? Oh, yeah. I said, Landis, start talking was my setup there. I was like, I'm done talking. You start talking. No, vibes. Like you were sitting there for a day and a half with no Longhorns and Buckeyes to converse with. And then on Wednesday night, guys showed up. So like, what were the vibes Wednesday night?
The vibes were okay. It's a very weird setup here. Like typically for these, we're here for a number of days and these interviews tend to happen in the morning. Both Texas, I don't know what it was like for you guys in Miami, but both Texas and Ohio State landed at DFW, got off their plane and like went to interviews. And typically that's not the case. So I don't know. It doesn't feel like a normal bowl game, I guess, but I guess they're not supposed to. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think everyone's just like sick of talking, to be honest.
Yep.
And ready to play the game. It was cool
to see. Are you? You're not.
No.
Not.
But it's like, how many different ways can Quinn Ewers get asked about playing Ohio State? It turns out the answer is about 45, because that's what he sat through last night during their availability at the very lovely Gaylord Texan, by the way. Have you been there before? It's where they do the CFP stuff, right?
Yeah. No, I went to the mock CFP thing there. I've been to various Gaylords.
Yeah.
I was at a Gaylord property in Florida when there was a dentist convention there. And I've also been to the one in Tennessee. It's like little towns.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
It's like
I had never been there.
City.
Yeah, it was my first time there. Quite lovely. Ohio State is not at the Gaylord Texan. They're at the Hilton. Yeah, they're at the Hilton where they've stayed. I think it's where they stayed when they won the national championship here. So it's maybe good vibes for them. Their Ohio State's was very odd because they were late getting in. They landed at 7:30 local time. They rushed them to the podium. They were trying to get out of there in like 20 minutes for what was supposed to be a 40-minute interview session. So like it was good. I talked to Jim Knowles, talked to Chip Kelly. We have some clips here that we'll play later on in the show that I thought were interesting. The only thing that was kind of a bummer is that when Texas showed up, both Kyle Flood and Pete Kwiatkowski, their coordinators, were wearing cowboy hats. And I thought that meant Ohio State's coordinators would also be wearing cowboy hats, and they sadly were not wearing cowboy hats. But don't you think Chip Kelly would look good in the cowboy hat?
Oh, yeah. No, but especially Jim Knowles. Doesn't Jim Knowles? He's a Cornell cowboy.
I bet he owns one. Like he was in Oklahoma. He probably owns one. Yeah.
I bet you when he's at the shore, at the Jersey Shore, I bet you Jim Knowles walks on the beach shirtless in cowboy boots with the cowboy hat on. Look for that next time you're down there.
You know what did frustrate me, though? Kyle Flood, he's from Queens. He spent like his entire coaching career, like minus like 4 or 5 of them on the East Coast in like Delaware and New Jersey and New York. And not only was he wearing a cowboy hat, I felt like I was picking up on a little bit of like a Texas whistle in the way he was talking. It's like, all right, man,
you know how it is.
Turn it off. You're from Queens.
Yeah, it's okay. So do you want to do some stuff now, or do you want to save it for the actual breakdown to bring us some of the vibes of those interviews?
We can play. Let's play the Pete Kwiatkowski one now, because I do think it's interesting. He's been Texas's defensive coordinator since Sark got there in 2021. Okay. Prior to that, he was at Washington, and prior to that, he was at Boise State. This is the 4th time that he will coach against Chip Kelly's offense. He coached against him twice when he was at Boise. He was a defensive line coach. Chip was OC for one, head coach for the other. Was it LeGarrette Blount? I always forget who it was in that game. Threw the punch at the end of that game. And then he also faced him when he was defensive coordinator at Washington, and Chip was the head coach at UCLA. So I asked him about facing Chip for the fourth time, and you can also get a look at his cowboy hat. So Mike can play that.
Defend, so you know going into it, you got to do a great job. I keep talking football terms, but leveraging, right? We got to have great leverage on the perimeter, and when we play tight coverage, we got to. They're going to make some throws and catches, and we got to do a good job of getting them on the ground. He's got so many different ways to attack you in the run game. That's the big challenge. Like, how are they gonna try and run the ball, or want to run the ball against this game? That's where you got to do a good job identifying it and adjusting to it.
I know coaches are always evolving. It's sort of unique. You face him when he was in Oregon, you face him when he was at UCLA, and now you get to face him when he's at Ohio State. Those offenses look similar, very different.
He does a really good job of tweaking and adjusting his offense to the personnel he has. And so I wouldn't say what he's doing now, it's a little different than what he did when he was at Oregon. They were way more up-tempo. At UCLA, it was a lot different because he was way more run-oriented at UCLA. Quarterback run game and get the ball to the running backs. And I think he's got a more balanced approach this year because of who he's got to work with.
Look at that. You just talking ball with the guy in a cowboy hat. That's all you want to be doing. That's all you want to be doing. Where's your
Yeah.
Have you ever worn a cowboy hat?
No, I don't know that they make cowboy hats big enough to fit my head. I have a hard enough time finding like regular baseball caps to fit my head. I don't think I could do a cowboy hat.
Are you over an 8? What are you?
Yeah, I am an 8. So, but like hats are weird. Like they're not all like sort of uniform. So like I can't usually wear snapbacks, and even sometimes fitted 8s don't fit my head because it's a big old noggin.
There was a guy that I covered in my previous life in Wilmington, Delaware. There was a baseball player from the state of Delaware named Kevin Mensch. And like the big thing about him was he had a huge head. And I think I wrote like a 8,000 word story about Delaware baseball player has huge head. And he was an 8. So maybe it's just something people in that area, they grow big, man. Okay, so do you think it's always one of these things that familiarity in a game like this, like if he has a little bit of a vibe of Chip, does that matter? Does it not matter? Is it an edge either way? Because Kelly could say the same thing about facing his defenses. Like, how do you think that plays out?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it was cut off in the beginning of that video. When I asked him exactly that. I said, "This is the fourth time you faced him. Does that give you any kind of edge?" And he kind of laughed, and then he paused for a few seconds. As if to like I think to acknowledge a little bit that like probably I think it helps. We talk about all the time how like it's hard in the NFL for teams to like get a schematic edge sometimes because a lot of it is homogenous. And college football is not that way. But if you play a guy as many times as these two guys have faced each other, then maybe that starts to come into play a little bit. I think college football is far more subject to just the weirdness of throwing 22-year-olds out there that maybe yes it can matter until the 19-year-old you have playing cornerback trips over his own feet and it's like, well, that didn't matter that time. So I think it helps. Like we talked about, like Jim Knowles has faced the Steve Sarkisian offense before, and then the other side of the ball we had this matchup between Chip Kelly and Pete Kwiatkowski. The difference I guess is that it's the marriage of Ryan Day's passing game with Chip Kelly's run game. So while there may be some familiarity with the way that Chip might want to attack you running the football, I don't know that there's as much with the passing game that Ryan Day and Chip have built on top of that.
Can we dip in on 2 quick Orange Bowl vibes? Again, this game is tonight. We will have a post game right after Penn State, Notre Dame, 7:30 Eastern, and is roughly the kickoff time for it. So make sure you join us tonight. It's a 2-show day on KOTN. Report from On3 that there's some guys on the Notre Dame team who have the flu, but they say it's mostly like backups and special teamers, but it's just like something to note. This is one of these things that it can have an effect on the game. And I didn't read it in the moment. I don't know if I am oblivious. I don't know what's wrong with me. But there are people who have read some of the body language from the James Franklin, Marcus Freeman press conference yesterday. And James Franklin was kind of joking around with Marcus Freeman. And there are some people who thought maybe Marcus Freeman didn't love it. that he was sort of like James Franklin was like, I'm 52 and you're 38. Like, you're a young guy and I'm the old guy. And made like a joke about Marcus Freeman's hairline because James Franklin is bald. Like, I don't know. I make stupid jokes all the time. James Franklin and I might have a lot of things. Actually, this is James Franklin to Marcus Freeman is like me to you. And I don't know how many times, maybe you can talk about this better. When I'm just on here being like, hey, man, we're joking around. Look at this. And then you get off the show and you're like, God, that guy. So I don't know. Did you read anything from afar on vibes? Did you get some vibes?
I thought I picked up on some vibes. I think I'm influenced by Notre Dame fans because I was just kind of like scrolling through Twitter as it was happening. There were a lot of Notre Dame fans who were like, "Boy, James Franklin talks a lot," and I don't know that they loved it. It's weird. Like there's always some a bit of a chumminess and some jokes in these head coach press conferences. I think that just kind of disarm the situation because they're kind of strange. But even with that being said, it did feel like James Franklin was being a little or was leaning into that maybe a little more than coaches typically do, like to the point where like I would have assumed by watching that press conference that like James Franklin and Marcus Freeman are like fishing buddies and like hang out all the time. But like I don't think that's the case. So then it's one of those things like, don't talk about me like you're familiar with me just because we're sitting on the same stage together. So I could see how that would bother Marcus Freeman. And from reading his body language, it seemed like it did a little bit.
Okay. I don't like I walked with Marcus after the news conference and just was talking about other stuff. He wasn't seething. It wasn't like, hey, Marcus, how you doing? He was like, oh, I can't believe it. So I don't know. But I feel like I have a kinship with James Franklin of possibly being like, stop joking around. Nobody wants this. You're overly familiar. Like, look at all that. Like, this is what I do here. It's like, hey, Robert and Sullivan and Doug and Sue. Like, hey, how you guys doing? It's like, God, Doug's overly familiar. Sue, by the way, love Sue. She says, no cowboy hats for the Buckeyes. We're not posers. So I do think, but also Texas is in Texas. So, right, they can wear them naturally. But you wanted a little Buckeye headgear and you just didn't get it. So it's fine.
No, I think if this was not I think in the past, Ohio State has shown up the Cotton Bowls that weren't playoff games and like wearing cowboy hats and stuff. Because it's like,
okay,
you wear a bolo tie and a cowboy hat because you're in Dallas.
I'm really feeling this now. James Franklin talked about Marcus Freeman's hairline. I talked about the size of your head. That was overly familiar. I said to you on this show, how big is your head? And
someone in the comments asked me what my inseam was. So that's more familiar.
I gotta watch myself. I'm the James Franklin podcast, and then like it's gonna be a big podcast tonight. I'm gonna blow it. Doug's the James Franklin podcast. Okay, you want to talk coaches?
Let's do it.
Or do you want to show any more clips? You want to talk coaches? Because I got a thing. Do you want to talk about the Dennis Dodd story? Did you talk about? Let's talk about the Dennis Dodd story. Do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, so before we're going to get into Steve Sarkisian versus Ryan Day, Dennis Dodd, very good national college football writer, wrote a story for CBS Sports under the headline, Ryan Day should take matters into his own hands, leave Ohio State no matter college football playoff outcome, which is just a heck of a hot one to come in with. Like you have the best team, you should quit. Are there vibes there about this story at all?
Yeah. Bewilderment, I think is the vibe. Like why, what are you talking about and why write that now? I think is the thing. He's here. Dennis Dodd is, so I don't know if he'll ask Ryan Day about that at the press conference if he goes to it. It's happening in about an hour, I think. Just like kind of puzzled by the stance and then also the timing of it. I think is the general response. Yeah.
People noting in the chat that Robert Landers, former Ohio State defensive tackle, used to rock the cowboy hat.
Sure did.
He did. He could pull it off. Here's a couple things briefly on this, and then there's something I want to cite from the story and a point I want to make. One is like I get the general idea. Like at times, Ryan Day, I think, has been very frustrated by some of the stuff that happens around Ohio State and what's going on. Again, I have said whatever is happening now, I don't think this is the low point. I think the low point for Ryan Day was after the Michigan loss in 2022, the second straight loss. And then they had a signing day where they came in and he felt like, I think Ohio State could not compete in the NIL marketplace at that point. They really liked Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs signed with Alabama. And I believe the Ohio State building at that moment felt like if this was pre-NIL, Caleb Downs would be a Buckeye. So the thing there was the present's not great because they just lost to Michigan for a second straight time, but also they had real questions about the future. Then they went out, played a very competitive game with Georgia, and did take some momentum into the offseason. It didn't make the Michigan loss vanish, but it helped. Right now, I don't think there are any questions about Ohio State's future. I think Ohio State is ready for this new era of college football. So, yes, they have to beat Michigan. But if you think like this is as bad as it's been for Ryan Day, I don't believe that to be the case. And so if this is like, and that's like I was talking about that, he's been through the fire and come out the other side. Now there's still parts of it. The Michigan's part of it is still burning. But a lot of the other stuff, he's already been hardened to this. And I know it can be frustrating in the modern era with fans' expectations. But I think if people are getting a read of like, this is it, I don't think that's the right read. I actually think it was worse 2 years ago from a frustration and stress standpoint than it is right now. So what do you think of that first?
I think in the moment, this November 30th of this year was worse than that. The compounding factor with 2022 is that you just had a lot of time to chew on that loss to Michigan.
Yep.
Because we were still in the 14 playoff. And with this most recent one, you got the reset pretty quickly. And there was definitely a ton of uncertainty going into the Tennessee game. But once we saw what Ohio State was on the field, then it just kind of all got put on the shelf, and we'll talk about it in May kind of thing, because Ohio State looks like it's ready to rock and roll in the playoffs. So I think with that in mind, this does feel different. I might still say that this loss this year to Michigan felt like a low point, because that was, to me, that was the first time that I was like, I don't know. They might have to do something with the head coach, because this was a terrible loss, and it was the fourth in a row, and you just weren't sure how they were going to rebound. Like, my mind has changed on that. I hope other people's minds have changed on that too, because of what they've been able to put on the field in these two playoff games. So that, I guess that's the part of that I found most confusing about it. It's like, because the insinuation to me is like Ryan Day is above being criticized for taking an absolutely terrible loss to Michigan.
Yeah.
Like, Ohio State fans are just supposed to be like, oh, whatever. Like, that's a fundamental misunderstanding of Ohio State's program and Ohio State's fan base, which is fine because you're not around it every day if you're a national writer. But then, like, don't pretend to be an expert on it. And then allow people like the opportunity to, again, like, just like the team, sort of reset and absorb what Ohio State has done with new information, and their perspective probably changes. So, like, the idea that Ryan Day should be giving Ohio State fans the finger on his way out, whether he wins or loses in this college football playoff, because they were mad that he lost to Michigan. Like, I actually find that quite preposterous, because of course they were upset when that happened, and they're happy now. That's how sports work.
Yeah, it's a results-based business. It's not personal. And again, I think people would say, well, sometimes it gets, and again, I don't, whatever. Now we're back to the lunatic fringe discussion. So I do think that is, and again, you hear it from the Ohio State players. And again, like, I don't love it. It's like, oh, people gave up. Whatever criticism or doubt existed around Ohio State after Michigan, they absolutely earned. And whatever momentum and praise around Ohio State right now, they absolutely earned. So it's one of those things. Either like ignore it all or take it all in, but it all comes from the same place. And so I just think it's odd. But here's the thing. There's two quick other points I want to make about this. There's a line that Dennis Dodd wrote in here about the Michigan loss that I want to cite, because it goes to what, okay, here we go. As it stands, the Buckeyes can win 14 games and still lose to Michigan, and that earmuffs Buck Nation. It's also Buckeye Nation. And that earmuffs Buck Nation would be okay. We're obsessing about Michigan because Buckeye Fan has driven us in its converted minivan adorned with scarlet and gray flags to this place. That is so wrong. It is so wrong. And I will tell Dennis Dodd this to his face for his own good. It is so wrong. It's unbelievable. If that's what happens with college football, that people suddenly don't care about regular season rivalries, the sport's dead. If that's what you're rooting for, hey, It's okay to lose to Michigan. You've lost everything that makes the sport great. What college football has right now is both, the best of both worlds. They have a 12-team playoff, and they also have rivalries in the regular season that still matters. All that people were worried about with the 12-team playoff is losing the value of the regular season. Now you're going to tell us don't value the regular season, don't value the biggest rivalry in college sports. It's such a fundamental misunderstanding of the entire sport. It's okay to lose to Michigan. Now, of course, it doesn't mean attack somebody's family. But it is you said the word preposterous. It is ridiculous thing to think and write. I can't believe he wrote it. You are writing the death notice of your sport. If for real, Ohio State, Michigan gets to it's fine.
Yeah. But it won't be. It's not I don't. It also feels like, and sports writers do this. I'm certainly guilty of it. You're responding to a minuscule percentage of people's reaction to a thing, right? I thought much of the reaction to Ohio State losing to Michigan, while quite angry, was reasonable. But this is a column written in response to the 2% that was unreasonable.
Right. And so the final thing is this, and I do again, you want to be happy. Do you want to, so we had the media party at the Orange Bowl last night. And so then I had two beverages and I was like, I am ready for a nap. I am, but I was fine. But that was around a lot of people who had 22. I don't know how many.
More than two. Yeah.
And in the course of that, you just conjure up things. This is nothing. This is absolutely zero reporting. It's just nothing. But you want to know the scenario? If you want to create the Dennis Dodd scenario, know what it is? Mike Vrabel, head coach of the New England Patriots. Mike Vrabel, who once tried to hire Ryan Day as the offensive coordinator of the Tennessee Titans. Ryan Day, who grew up watching the Patriots on Sundays with his grandpa. Ryan Day, who's from New Hampshire. Ryan Day going to be Mike Vrabel's offensive coordinator with the Patriots to watch his son. He can go to the Friday night football games for RJ for a couple more years of high school. And then if things work out, he'd be a head coach candidate in the NFL in 3 years. If you want to play dodgeball, that's dodgeball. If you're gonna well, what would it even look like? It's well, I could tell you what I tell you exactly what it could look like. It could look like that. I don't think it's going to happen, and that's my last point. But you like that one? That's 22 drinks in, not my drinks. That I was sober for that idea, but it started to come out. So it's because there's pieces there this. The one thing might happen, and the one thing did happen. That's how Ryan Day got a raise at Ohio State. And then as we've talked about this before, and I've talked about this with Ryan Day. He tried to hire Ryan Day. Ryan Day stayed at Ohio State. He hired Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur was the offensive coordinator for the Titans for 1 year and got the Packers head coaching job.
Yeah.
And there's a path where that's Ryan Day.
I mean, the three people most responsible for Ryan Day being elevated to the status that he's at are Chip Kelly, Urban Meyer for bringing Ryan Day here, and then Mike Vrabel for validating Ryan Day's value to Ohio State by trying to steal him to go be the Titans offensive coordinator.
So if he's going to go be the head coach of the team, the team that if anybody, it's oh, what's your dream job? But it's the only team that Ryan Day has a personal connection to on any level of major football is the Patriots. Mm-hmm. And his family really matters to him. He has family in New England still. So that's all. I'm not predicting anything, but if you want to play dodgeball, there it is.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. If Ohio State wins the national championship, if anybody's going to do it, they have the best chance to be the new modern dynasty in college football. Would you want to leave that? Because the future's good. Got to figure out this Michigan thing, but you don't have to beat Michigan to win a national title. Jeremiah Smith's here 2 more years. Caleb Downs is here another year. Ohio State has Julian Sain and Tavian St. Clair lined up as quarterbacks. They've figured out the portal. They're going to be better at offensive tackle next year because they've already got guys in the portal. They're being aggressive. They're being strategic there. They're still recruiting at a very high level. I think they right now have modern college football figured out as well as anybody. Maybe Oregon, but there's nothing. You got to respect Oregon, but it's not like Ohio State's afraid of Oregon. Mm-hmm. So Ryan Day might get his first one. He could get 3 in the next 5 years too. So
Yeah.
do you want to leave that?
Right. No, I don't. To go be 7-10 or whatever in the NFL for a couple of years. Yeah, I would think not. It is interesting. Both these coaches, Ryan Day and Steve Sarkisian. I had what do you call it? First take on my TV this morning because I was too hungover to get up to grab the remote and change the channel.
Oh wait, how many did you have?
Like too many. I think is probably the way. Yeah. We had casino night here. We were cleaning up on the roulette table.
Can I just say something? They announced, it was weird. They went through like a 7-minute thing before the James Franklin Marcus Freeman press conference of like what exactly the media party is going to be. While Marcus Freeman is there, like, can I leave? Do I need every detail of the media party? And they said it was going to be a casino night, and then it wasn't. It was Mexican food, which was lovely, but I was like kind of looking around. I was like, "Where's the casino?" Instead, I got sunshine. So sorry. Okay,
we had casino night. A towel warmer was one of the prizes. I was a little jealous I didn't win that one. Yeah, but anyway, on ESPN they were talking about how the NFL. Adam Schefter was saying like Sark and Ryan Day are probably going to get NFL interest this cycle. I don't know. I know actually how attractive the like rising college coach to the NFL thing is anymore. I guess both those guys have experience in the NFL, so maybe that's different. But it's like not going to go away. It'll always be lingering there. But to your point, like I don't know that either one of these head coaches is in a position to leave what feel like 2 of the programs positioned best to like be at the top of the sport for the next decade.
The other thing is, if Ryan Day wins a national title, it fundamentally changes everything about his relationship to the program and relationship to the fans. Because the thing that happened, Jim Tressel at Ohio State won a national title in year 2. And then you earn that capital. So everything else that goes wrong, and by the way, people love Jim Tressel now in hindsight. I covered 7 of the Jim Tressel years. People were like, this offense is stale. He's too loyal to his assistant coaches. Why don't they do the run and shoot? He's got to give up play calling. I can't believe they lost 2 straight national title games. It drove people nuts. Ohio State fans were mad during the Tressel era, and they love him in hindsight, but they had a national title. He had that in his pocket. So everything is like, okay, Urban Meyer wins a national title in year 3. Ryan Day doesn't have that. So like when Ryan Day, if that Michigan lost, a 4th straight loss to Michigan, to an overmatched Michigan team, that was a bottom that did not have an equivalent peak, which makes that bottom worse. If he now has a national championship trophy, that is the ultimate peak. There is almost no bottom other than going 2-10 that can match that peak. It changes everything. It doesn't mean that losing to Michigan is okay, but it fundamentally changes the relationship. And so whatever he feels like he has gone through, it will never be like that again, because whatever happens going in forward, you'll be a national championship coach, and it changes everything. But to say like, oh, well, they might win the national championship. Why were you so mad about Michigan? Did it feel like a national championship team the day after the Michigan loss? Right. Did not feel like a national championship team. Now it does. So now people also, like you said, it's okay to change your mind. So I just think I think it's a disingenuous conversation to be like, well, how dare you? It's like, yeah, because it's a results business and people change their opinions based on results.
Yeah.
That's literally it. People really like, I think Ohio State fans really respect and like Ryan Day personally. That's a bad loss anyway. God, I don't know. It feels like a simple conversation to me that a lot of people are making complicated.
I agree. And I think it could be as simple, like, if it wasn't such a big deal, like Ohio State wouldn't have had like multiple player coach meeting, like, which they've talked openly about, like, we have to get on the same page. We have to have honest conversations with each other. It's like, if that game was just a whatever, we lost, okay, let's move on kind of thing, like none of that stuff would have happened. So like, if the team is doing that, if the team is like hunkering down and reassessing and making sure that they're like, directed the right way as they go into the postseason, why can't the fan base do that too? Like it's I don't know. It's like you said, it's really simple. I don't know why we have to make it more complicated than it is.
All right, let's talk about Steve Sarkisian versus Ryan Day. Is Steve Sarkisian, Ryan Day, what people thought Lincoln Riley versus Ryan Day once upon a time was going to be?
I think it could be. Yeah. Sark's not like a wonderkind, I think, in the way that Lincoln Riley was viewed, right? Sark's been around the block a little bit. but it's offensive whiz quarterback guy. So I think it could be similar there. I think in the end now, although you made a good point when you were laying out the roster construction, how the Texas is like pretty comfortable just kind of hunkering down in Texas. I think you'll see Ohio State versus Texas kind of like head to head in roster building more than you ever saw Ryan Day versus Lincoln Riley. And we never saw that on the field either. So, and I think this could be the first, well, I guess it's technically the second time Day versus Sark, but Sark wasn't OC the first time. But I don't know this will be the last time. Obviously, they're going to play each other next year in the regular season, but I'm talking postseason stuff. I think this is the beginning of something we'll see more than once moving forward.
We had like a little Ohio State Clemson thing for a couple of years there. I think Ohio State Texas could be that next thing because they're going to play. They're going to open next year against each other in Columbus, and they're going to play in Austin in 2026, and they will see each other again in the playoffs. Steve Sarkisian, as you said, not quite the wonderkind. Lincoln Riley's 41, Steve Sarkisian's 50, and Ryan Day is 45. So it's a little bit like, okay, if Ryan Day is a little older than Riley, well, actually Sark's a little older than Ryan Day. Year 4 at Texas for Sark. Year 6 at Ohio State for Ryan Day. 68-10 for Day. That's an 872 winning percentage. 38-16 at Texas. 704 winning percentage for Sark. And this is one of these things, again, like you just slice it. I'm not trying to like be disingenuous. I went top 10 instead of top 5. Ryan Day now, especially with these couple last wins, 12-8 against the top 10. Sark's 2-6. So there's a lot of these, like a lot of times, like, oh, Ryan Day can't. Really, in the end, almost every coach who's not Nick Saban, your real criticism, if you're good, is you can't win the big game. Because like that's where it's hard. Like a lot of great coaches, they win the games they're supposed to win. And then when you get to other games, you don't win them as much. Sark doesn't have a million wins like this, man. Right? Like this this would be obviously this is a huge game, but like, again, to say that Ryan Day and Ohio State avenged a loss to Clemson in 2019 with that 2020 semifinal win against Clemson to get to the national title game, that they just had that win over Oregon, the number 1 team in the country. Like Day's got multiple wins in his pocket that this version of Texas with Sark can't claim yet.
Yeah, that's right. I also like the way that Mike had that graphic crop where it looked like the horns were coming out of Sark's head. That was nice.
Oh, yeah. That's horn side.
It was like Bullwinkle.
It's like, Sark, we're going to hire you, but we're going to graft horns onto your head because people are really into it here. He's like, okay.
I like how both of them are wearing their team color suits.
Yeah. And Day's head is the shape of a block O right there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cinder blockhead coaches in college football. I would like to make an all cinder blockhead college coaching team because there's just kind of like that Midwestern thing, the way your head's shaped. I think Ryan Day's head is not quite as cinder block shaped as a lot of guys. Like Brett Bielema's got a cinder block head, right? Yeah. And it's not an affront. It's like everyone's head is shaped differently, but this makes Ryan Day's head look like more of a cinder block.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Oh, you're very judgmental about the size of people's heads. I'm learning.
I really am. This is for real. That's like the third James Franklin type thing I've said today, where I'm just absolutely joking around and judging people. And Ryan Day's going to be like, "Do you hear what Doug said about your head, Ryan Day?" He's like, "I'm going to kill that guy." Okay. So Sark versus Ryan Day, like this is, is there an edge here? I think they're similar in a lot of ways, but I think if there's an edge, it's actually to Ryan Day because he's won games like this in a way that Sark lost to Georgia twice, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Sark lost to Georgia twice. They lost their semifinal last year. So like Ryan Day has more experience winning playoff games than Sark has. I think the edge is to Ryan Day. I think the edge is to Ohio State's coaching staff generally in this game. I think both are very good staffs. What's interesting, we were at the Cotton Bowl where last year during the head coach's press conference, Eli Drinkwitz from Missouri was asked about like his decision to give up play calling and gave like a 3-minute answer that I thought was very well thought out, that also felt like he was talking directly to Ryan Day about the merits of a play calling head coach giving it up for the betterment of the team. And then Day obviously gave that up this year to Chip Kelly. Sark still calls the plays for Texas. So I hope that someone who was here, I'm hoping that someone who was here last year to experience the Drinkwitz Day dynamic asked the same question to see like if Ryan Day might give the same answer and whether or not see how Steve Sarkisian reacts to that. He's the only offensive play caller left among the head coaches. There were only 3 coming into the playoff, and Sark is the last one standing. Like it's not, it's Jimbo, right? He's the last offensive play calling head coach to win a national title. So Sark is trying to buck that trend. I think Ohio State in a lot of ways has been put in better positions because Ryan Day has given some of that up, but also now in the postseason, I think he's a little more involved too in a way that's helping Ohio State. So there's always a balance there. But it's about the experience. And I think Ryan Day's experience in big games gives Ohio State a little bit of an edge here.
A lot in common between these two programs, I think. And again, like this is I started covering Ohio State in 2005. The very first game I ever covered was the Ohio State-Texas game in Ohio Stadium when Vince Young beat Ohio State, and then going down in 2006 for a 1-2 matchup. Colt McCoy is a young guy, Troy Smith. I did like a huge story about the similarity between the Ohio State and Texas athletic departments. As much as like Ohio State can have things in common with like Alabama and Georgia, I actually do think from like size, scope, money, Texas is the program that they have the most in common with. CNBC did a little thing. I don't even know how they come up with these valuations, but they deemed Ohio State the most valuable college football program, worth $1.32 billion. And Texas was second at $1.28 billion, whatever that means. But the Ohio State-Texas history, it's like, I feel a little bit sad. People are like, oh, Doug, you're going to go from Florida to Dallas? And I was like, I'm old. I'm not going to do that. But like briefly, but I've been at every Ohio State-Texas game that's ever been played because they've only played 3 times for the Ohio State-Texas history. Texas leads it 2-1. Texas won in 2005, which allowed that Texas team to then go on in the Rose Bowl and beat USC in the game of the century. Then Ohio State got revenge the next year in the first of what would be 3 1-2 games that Ohio State played that year in 2006. They played Texas, and then they played Michigan, and then they played Florida, the national championship game. And then the 2008 Fiesta Bowl. Like this was, that was like a nice little window, but like it's kind of interesting that that's it, Landis. And again, sometime in this, there was a little bit of for brief moments during realignment, should Texas join the Big Ten was floated by people at various times. It was like, can you imagine Ohio State and Texas? There's another thing. I think it was in something that Pat Forty wrote. He had like a funny little thing. I saw Pat here this week, like a funny little thing on Sports Illustrated about like a grading scale for the 4 teams in the playoff and who you should root for. And he was adding points and taking away points for various teams. And he had something about like, if you've bullied the teams in your conference, you get -5 points. And he gave -5 to Texas and Ohio State. And like I have said a million times over the years, like one of the reasons that the Big Ten is healthy and the Big 12 like has been a mess is because Ohio State has been a better partner to Big Ten teams than Texas has been to Big 12 teams. So I thought that was a little like unfair in terms of like, did Ohio State ever start its own network? Did Ohio State ever be like, let's take Michigan and let's go somewhere else? It's like, no, Ohio State said, we'll share the money equally with Purdue. So like if sometimes, of course, at times, when you're a program like this, you throw your weight around. But it's like comparatively, Texas has been a jackhole, haven't they? Texas is a jackhole to itself and its neighbors. And Ohio State, of course, can be pompous and can be self-important, but actually has earned a lot of that and has been a better friend.
Was there talk when the Longhorn Network launched that Ohio State might try to do the same thing?
No, because like immediately, Gene Smith was always this way. Like it was just, he would like shoot that stuff down immediately. Like that's not what we're doing. It's not about doing something on our own. Like it was just like, it was the minute it was brought up, it was gone because we're doing it together. We're doing it as a collective. And like the Big Ten Network changed college football. But if Ohio State, I mean, you need a driver for a network like that, and you need it to be a driver that's like, yeah, come along with us, not we're doing it on its own. So like that is so fundamentally different. Big Ten Network versus Longhorn Network. It's the shorthand that tells you everything you need to know about how these two universities, athletic programs, and football teams have operated in this new modern era. And it really matters because one of them is still in the same league that added, and one of them left to go to a new league. And it's because of how they act. Texas absolutely could have been a program that was the tent pole for the modern Big 12, and to have a Texas-based conference where you reach out and you bring them some people and say, man, we're going to do this. People care enough about football for the Big 12 to be that kind of program. Texas didn't want to be it. Sorry. That's just facts. Yeah. We're nicer in the North. We're nicer. We're so nice.
We are nice. Yeah, I agree.
When I sat in the tiki hut, there were 4 young people in pool chairs, and I went over and I said, I apologize in advance. You're going to get a free podcast, whether you want it or not. and I'm a yeller. And they were like, "Oh, no big deal. It's fine." They left. So
is that did you took the Tiki Hut back from Andy Staples?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I kicked him out in the middle of the show. No, he was done. He was done. So then I came in afterwards.
I can't believe
so
you
like,
yeah.
I know. So Ohio State leads the series again. Both these teams are top 10 in wins, top 7 in wins all time. We talked about it. Same thing for Penn State and Notre Dame on yesterday's show. Ohio State, 976 wins all time, number 2 in the nation, only behind Michigan. And Texas, 961 wins. That's tied for 4th. They are tied with Notre Dame. So, like, that's part of this. If Texas loses and Notre Dame wins, Notre Dame moves ahead. Like a little north-south battle here between teams who aren't playing each other. Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I think these are 2 programs that should play each other, and I'm really glad they're playing in the regular season. But even this is like beyond this, where I do think Texas in a lot of ways is similar to Ohio State. Ohio State 36 sports, Texas only 21. That it is just like there's a lot of these SEC teams that don't have quite as many sports. That Ohio State has 36 sports is crazy. And like that's why sometimes there's a discussion about should Ohio State cut back. They're so gigantic. They could drop 15 sports and still be the same size as Texas. So, and Ohio State, to its credit, I was like, no, we're not going to do that. I think there are times Ohio State should do that. But like they are so much bigger than everybody else when it comes to this kind of thing. And then they're both gigantic campuses. 52,000, I think, at the Austin campus for Texas, 60,000 at the Columbus campus for Ohio State. There's a lot in common, I think, when these 2 fan bases show up down there, Landis. Like they can look at each other and they can do the Spider-Man. I can make another Spider-Man meme. Notre Dame and Penn State are the same, and Texas and Ohio State are the same.
I think even the city, I've never actually been to Austin, but what I know of it, it seems like Columbus and Austin are actually like quite similar with like their rate of growth, like population growth and like business sector growth. Like they're kind of the more like 2 of the hotter towns, I think, in the country. People are kind of flocking to. No, I actually thought their athletic departments were, in terms of number of sports, were more similar in size. But I always think of like the best overall athletic programs, and not even like thinking championships necessarily, just like scope and money and brand. It's these 2 that I think of.
And then it's one of those, like, you could, and maybe not anymore. We're going to be realistic, but like what states are most defined by the sport of football? Isn't it these 2 states? Isn't it Texas and Ohio?
So. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I mean,
and then
these
are the state universities of those 2. So it really is. And we're going to get it now, and then we're going to get it on August 30th. So like, welcome to Ohio State, and we might get a next year's playoff. Get used to this. You ready to do a big game breakdown? You got all the stuff.
Yep.
I'm going to nod. We'll do it next on KOTN. Back on Kings of the North. Subscribe, like, give a review, tell a friend, but mostly just thanks for being here. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. We're covering both these semifinals live on site. We will both be at the national championship game in Atlanta on January 20th. We'll start with the Ohio State offense versus the Texas defense, Bill, in this big game breakdown. Where are you starting?
So I'm a little confused because I was watching. I wasn't able to watch the Peach Bowl quarterfinal, Texas Arizona State, like all that intently because we were like arriving to the Rose Bowl as it was happening. I caught the end, but I actually sat down like to watch the whole game on the flight down here, and like I'm watching it, I'm like, man, this defense is fast. Man, this defense is big. Man, this defense is physical. And it's like, okay, but Clemson had 412 yards and averaged 6 yards a play, and Arizona State had 510 yards and averaged almost 5.5 yards per play. So it's again like I'm in this phase of like, clearly these guys are good, clearly these guys are talented. Are the numbers perhaps a bit misleading because of some of the offenses that Texas has had to play this year? Texas, by the Brian Fermeau index, is the number 3 defense. Ohio State's the number 2 offense. So it's a great matchup from that perspective. Number 2 passing defense in the country in terms of efficiency for Texas. They don't give up a lot of explosive plays. Their coverage grade on PFF as a team is number 1 in the country. But then I'm going through, who have they played from a passing standpoint that could even compare to Ohio State? And the answer is nobody. But it's also like the best passing offense that Texas has played this year might be Florida, and that game Aiden Warner played quarterback for Florida. So, and like Arizona State is like an actually surprisingly decent passing offense, even without its number 1 receiver. Like they threw it for almost 300 yards in that game against Texas, and then Kate Klubnik threw for 336. So like I'm super excited for this matchup between Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Will Howard, a quarterback for Ohio State, playing really well. And then Jahdae Barron, the Thorpe Award winner in Texas's secondary. I think Malik Muhammad, the other corner, is very good. I think the safeties are excellent. Andrew Makuba and Michael Taft, both good in coverage, both very physical. But could it just be like, yeah, that's all good, but they haven't seen Jeremiah Smith. They haven't seen Emeka Egbuka. They haven't seen Carnell Tate. And will Ohio State just sort of be able to keep this engine humming the way it's been humming in these first 2 games? I think the difference, and I asked Chip Kelly about this, we can play the clip in a second, is like, up front, Texas does have a lot of speed and a lot of size. And I think while Ohio State has played 2 very good defensive fronts so far in the playoff in Tennessee and Oregon, I think this Texas one is better. I think this Texas one is probably the best perhaps that Ohio State would see the rest of the way here. Maybe slightly better than Penn State's, especially if Abdul Carter's not healthy. I think better than Notre Dame's, with Notre Dame dealing with some injuries. So, Mike, let's play that clip of Chip Kelly talking about the Texas defense.
Favorable to, we thought the same thing when we were playing Tennessee. I think their front starts with their front. It's not only fast, it's big, and I think probably bigger than some of the defenses that we face. So I think, and how do we handle those guys? Collins inside, Simmons on the outside. He's got 9 or 10 sacks as a freshman rusher. So, they got some speed. Anthony Hill can really run at linebacker. And then the secondary, they get the Jim Thorpe Award winner. And I think the 2 safeties are outstanding. Maybe as good a pair of safeties as we've seen and faced. So, it's legit. But you don't get to this point in the season where there's 4 teams left and say, hey, these guys, they're good on one side but not good on the other. I think they're really, really good on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, Sark has always been known for that. But this defense is legit. I think they're first in the country in red zone defense. 134 teams. That's pretty good. So, it's going to be now.
They're actually 3rd in red zone defense.
Come on, Chip.
Penn State's first. Chip didn't watch the show yesterday. Penn State's first. Ohio State is 2nd. Texas is 3rd. They're all quite good.
Yeah.
I always keep an ear out for like when you throw a generic question to a coach about a team, and then they want to get specific with names. And the first name that comes out of their mouth, like when we talked with Chip Kelly about Oregon the first time around, it was Jordan Birch immediately. And this time it was Alfred Collins. 6'5", I think 340 in the middle of Texas's defensive line. Ohio State's offensive line reworked has played well in these 2 games, and I think Ryan Day and Chip Kelly have done a really nice job of scheming things up to help them as well. They might need that more in this game than they've needed it in the first 2, with the combination of what Texas has on the inside with Collins and Vernon Broughton, and then just a ton of speed off the edge with Colin Simmons, Trey Moore, Barron Sorrell. Like they just really get after you. So that's Texas's path to trying to win this game, I think, is to try to overwhelm that offensive line and overwhelm Will Howard.
So there's a couple things that I'm trying to be on alert for here in trying to not overlook Texas, which is a very talented team, but also what you're describing might be like less than the sum of its parts. Great individual players, but hey, I mean, like Clemson and Arizona State kind of did some stuff on them. I'm on alert for football things that Michigan did, not mental block things for Ohio State, but Michigan, great front, great tackles, but also some edge rusher guys. Like, is that a thing? Like, hey, that was a part of the deal. That was a real problem for Ohio State. Is there anything that's like, okay, well, maybe Texas could do a version of that too with their front?
Yeah, I think so. I think like we've referenced that, I think, in every big game breakdown we've done for Ohio State since the Michigan game, is like, can someone else try to mimic that? And I think Tennessee and Oregon probably tried, but weren't quite ready to do that. Texas, to me, at least on paper, looks like the team most capable of giving you some facsimile of that. I'm not saying would be exactly the same thing. I don't think Texas's tackles are as good as Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. But the secondary is pretty good, and their tackles are still good, and the defensive line generally is quite good. So I think there's something there, but it wasn't, in my opinion, like the Michigan game. There was something schematically that Michigan did there to put a cap on Ohio State's defense, but I also don't, or offense, excuse me, but I also don't think Ohio State ever adjusted well enough to attack that. And I think if they encountered it again, they would. So I think it's a fine plan. I just don't know if it's the kind of trap you can get Ohio State to walk into twice.
Okay. Jahdae Barron, as you said, the Thorpe Award winner, highest graded individual corner in the country on PFF. Mm-hmm. One of the things that really stands out about him, he, according to PFF, only gives up 7.8 yards per catch, which is in the top 10 in the country. So it's like he gives up only like 54% of the time when you throw at him. I think he has 35 catches allowed on 65 targets. And some of that is like, well, were you really in a zone and you were just the closest guy? But anyway, he doesn't give up much big. And so I'm very curious. I would imagine, right? It's like one of these things you always talk about. Oh, is he going to follow Jeremiah Smith around? I would imagine he's not going to follow Jeremiah Smith around. But again, a little like, are they prepared to have a game plan to limit? Because by the way, in the postseason, the 2 playoff games, deep passes of 20 yards or more, Will Howard's 8 of 9 for 271 yards. That they did not do it a ton during the regular season, but when they did it, Will Howard was actually statistically pretty good at it, and now they're doing it more. They are killing people with it. Mm-hmm. Can Ohio State kill Texas down the field, or is the secondary too good?
I think the secondary is good, also combined with the way they play. They just keep a lot of stuff in front of them. This is not a direct quote from Jahdae Barron, but from talking with him on Wednesday night, he kind of seemed eager to follow Jeremiah Smith around. I think he wants that challenge. He's a guy who was more of a nickel last year and then wanted to move out the corner, I think, to, show some versatility, but also take on some new challenges. And he played very well there. He won the Thorpe Award. I think he's their best defensive back. I think they could afford to have him travel with Jeremiah Smith if they wanted to. If they think that they could use a combination of their nickel slot guy and a safety to contend with Emeka Egbuka, I'm probably going to trust Jeremiah Smith to win more often than not one-on-one against anybody. So I don't think you can solo him up for the whole game, but that is something to look out for, is whether or not Jahdae Barron does follow Jeremiah Smith around. And boy, wouldn't that be? I mean, that's you need an ISO camera on that. If that's what happens, ESPN should have a separate channel just for that matchup. So, I think like Ohio State has been pretty good, like against zone coverage, passing wise. Will Howard has, like, the receivers know how to get open. The receivers know how to find space. So I think there's going to be opportunities there. I think what could be a struggle is the big hits we've seen in the playoffs so far from Ohio State. Like, they might have to move it down the field a little bit more methodically and then execute in the red zone. Where again, Texas's defense is very good, but Ohio State's offense is also very good. Ohio State's number 5 in red zone touchdown percentage on offense. They were number 1 at one point. And that might be where you need to see Will Howard get his legs more involved. Quinshon Judkins has been very good carrying the ball down there. I think Will Howard has been a good enough red zone passer too. So I think Ohio State, I think getting over 40 the way that it did in the first 2 games will be a little bit more challenging in this, because I do want to show some respect to Texas's defense. But the plan that Ohio State has had in these 2 games, with Chip Kelly tweaking the run game and doing a lot more counter stuff and building some really nice passes off of that. I think Ryan Day being much more hands-on with the passing game design and getting more vertical with what they want to do. It just presents a lot of challenges, even for the best defenses. So as long as it's not a situation where Texas's defensive line totally overwhelms Ohio State's offensive line, I think Ohio State's still going to score in this game.
Texas 44 sacks, 2.93 per game. That's 15th in the country. Do you think there's a chance that they could overwhelm Ohio State's offensive line?
Yeah, I think so. Like Donovan Jackson's played really well at left tackle. Josh Fryer, the right tackle, injured his ankle against Tennessee. and I think has played fine through it, but there were a couple of snaps against Oregon where I thought maybe that ankle might have been bothering him, and Jordan Birch beat him a couple times. I don't know that there's Texas has good size and speed off the edge. My thing with Fryer in particular has always been, how do you handle speed? And Colin Simmons, the freshman who won Freshman of the Year, has 9 sacks. He actually has 12 pressures in the playoff, which is second among all players in the playoff behind JT Tuimoloau from Texas. Actually, I was it's actually kind of fun. You can just just put all the teams who are in the playoff and to sort through the last couple of games to see who's been playing really well. Yeah. 7 of the top 10 players and pressures generated in the playoff are in this game.
Oh.
JT Tuimoloau's first, Colin Simmons is second, Jack Sawyer, Tyleek Williams, Barron Sorrell of Texas, all in the top. That's the top 5. And then also Trey Moore and Vernon Broughton from Texas are both in the top 10.
Okay.
So it's 2 defensive lines that are playing really well.
Will Howard has thrown 3 devastating picks this year, 1 for a pick 6 against Penn State, 2 against Michigan. He played really well in both Oregon games. He played great in the Tennessee game. He's on a roll. Where are the Will Howard vibes? This guy's got it. He's the best quarterback in the playoff. Let's go. Or how do you, because it felt sort of going into the Michigan game, it's he threw that pick 6 against Penn State, but and then it happened again. Is there just should Ohio State fans have the utmost faith in Will Howard for this one?
I think so, with the way that he's played in the last 2 games, and the way that he's played great the last 2 games, and I think he's played really well all year, because he's had. I mean, even the Michigan game, he was bad. Everyone on offense was bad, but he also he got his bell rung in that game. We were wondering if he should have stayed in it. He clearly wasn't himself. Every other game, he's had far more good moments than he's had bad. Even the Penn State game where he had a devastating pick, he bounced back really nice from that. Actually, interesting enough, I think the Nebraska game where it was sort of clunky, and I think Ohio State only ended up scoring 21 points. That was Will Howard's, I think, best regular season game from a passing efficiency standpoint. He was good. They just didn't score a bunch. So I would have faith in him. And he's highly motivated for obviously he's motivated for the obvious reasons, but he's never beaten Texas. He's gotten a couple cracks at Texas and never beat them. I think the best game he played at Kansas State was last year. They were playing in Austin. They got down big and rallied in the 4th quarter, and I think got it to overtime and had a chance to win, and they didn't quite get it done. But that is still actually the most career passing yards that Will Howard has had. I think it was 324 against Texas's defense last year. So he's done a good job, I think, of finding different things to give him a little bit of an edge throughout the season. And this is another one because he would like to beat Texas, I think, before his career ends.
All right, you want to flip it?
Let's flip it.
All right. Here's the thing that I'm curious about, again, from a Michigan perspective here. Texas in week 2 against the Michigan defense didn't punt in the first half, had a 51-yard drive, a 56-yard drive, a 76-yard drive, a 29-yard drive off a pick, and a 42-yard drive off an interception, was up 24-3 at halftime on Michigan. Didn't punt, and that was against the full Michigan defense. Will Johnson was in that game. He was only targeted once. They basically just threw at Jair Hill the whole game. But that's Mason Graham, it's Josiah Stewart, it's Kenneth Grant. It is the full effect of what I think in the end, by the end of this year, everybody realized you have to respect that Michigan defense. And Texas really did a very good job against it. And then Ohio State against a Michigan defense that didn't include Will Johnson had a much more difficult time. I'm just looking for Michigan things because, again, that's a common opponent here. That as many, there's a part of me that has multiple questions about the Texas offense, but that Michigan game, I wanted to make sure I was you know what? They actually did a pretty good job then.
Yeah, I think they did do a good job then. I think Michigan's defense evolved over the course of the year too. Wink Martindale stopped pressing the blitz button so much, I think, and started putting them in some better positions. But that's a good defense that Texas did a nice job against. I also Quinn Ewers is probably not the same quarterback now that he was then. He's got some injury stuff ankle and an oblique, which I think the oblique is really hindering his ability to put some zip on the ball, especially when he's trying to throw it downfield. So like, I think that game shows the ceiling. Like, it's Quinn Ewers, they got good receivers, they have an excellent offensive line. Sark can scheme it up. Like, it's who are we talking to? Somebody from Ohio State's defense. It might have been Caleb Downs, I think, said like, this is a team that can put 40 on you like in a blink if you're not careful. Like, they have that kind of firepower. They just haven't really found that level for much of the season. I think the offense has been underwhelming a little bit for Texas, and they've got running back injuries, and like as I said, Quinn's not 100% himself. I know like Isaiah Bond, the receiver, didn't play. He got hurt in the SEC championship, and then he didn't play in the first playoff game. He did play last week, so they've had some injury stuff going against them. But I think you have to respect the 100% A+ version of this offense and what it could do to even very good defenses. It's just like, while Ohio State is operating, it seems like at near maximum capacity offensively, Texas has struggled, I think, to find that gear all year.
Ohio State was able to pressure Oregon without blitzing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was against two, what I thought was as good of a tackle combo as there is in the country. I think the Oregon tackles in that game gave up 10 pressures, and I think the inside guys gave up 8. Kelvin Banks, the Texas left tackle, might be the best tackle in the country. Their right tackle, I guess Cam Williams will be okay and he'll play, but the backup filled in okay. Do you think Ohio State in this game will be able to get pressure on Texas without blitzing? Because that seemed to be the key of why their defense was so devastating against the Ducks.
I think so. I think the trio of Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau on the edge, and Tyleik Williams at tackle have all kind of hit their stride together, which was always
I think that's right.
Yeah, it was like always the vision. They're all from the same 2021 recruiting class. Jack and JT were 5-star prospects. Tyleik Williams was like a high 4-star prospect, but people were really, really high on his potential as like a big athletic guy. And they've all had their moments individually. They have not all been playing at this level together at any point previous in their career. So I'm going to assume that continues. This is a good Texas offensive line. I think they're better at tackle than they are in the interior, but the whole line is pretty good. I thought watching the Arizona State game that the guard, maybe it was the right guard in particular position, looked a little vulnerable at times when Arizona State was trying to generate some stuff. Cameron Williams, as you said, didn't play, so maybe last week, so maybe he's got a little bit of rust in addition to probably not being quite 100%. So I think, yes, I think Ohio State will be able to do that. And if and when Ohio State is able to do that, they become really difficult to move the ball on, because they can just sit in this structure that they've landed on the last couple of games, with Jordan Hancock playing back in a split safety spot next to Lathan Ransom, and Caleb Downs just kind of sitting in the middle at about 10, 12 yards. He's there to rob inside routes. He's there to defend against RPOs. He's close enough to the line of scrimmage where he can trigger downhill and defend against the run. I think without offensive linemen being able to climb up to get him, he's just become the ultimate weapon for Ohio State's defense. And it has a defense that has been good all year, I think now has unlocked something even more because of the way they're using Caleb Downs now. I asked Jim Knowles a little bit about that. We have a clip, Mike, if you want to run it.
Really good. I mean, so it makes me look good. But, I've done that throughout my career with different players, more with players from the front than the back end. But, at Oklahoma State, when you had to defend against the explosive play all the time, is really when I created that structure. And, it just makes sense when you have a guy like Caleb Downs to get him in the middle of the action.
Why weren't you doing that early on? Or I guess maybe why are you doing it more now in the back half than you were in the first half?
Didn't need it, I guess. I mean, we've played pretty well over the course of my time here. So, it's my job to pull these things out when we need them. And, that was, and I think, we didn't have a great game against Oregon. So the first time, and, that led me to say, okay, what can I do now to change things up? And that's
Did you drop Downsbacker as a position name on him at all?
No, I wanted to try to grab him away from the podium for a couple minutes, but I didn't get a chance to because I got out of there pretty quickly. But Caleb Downs will be here next season too, so maybe we can talk about that at some point in the offseason.
Yeah, that's a good. We just want it on the depth chart.
Yeah.
We did we ranked all these playoff teams coming in, and I don't think we particularly were enamored with the Texas skill. Matthew Golden, though, their best receiver, has had the two best games of his career. He's a Houston transfer, played 2 years at Houston, first year at Texas. In the SEC championship game, he had 8 catches for 162 against Georgia, and then against Arizona State, he had 7 catches for 149. Texas throws it down the field just by numbers over the course of the year. They throw it deep a little more than Ohio State, but Quinn Ewers isn't great at it. And when I said Will Howard's 8 of 9 for 271 yards on throws of 20 yards or more in the playoff, Quinn Ewers is 4 of 9 for 119 yards for the season. He completes 36% of his throws 20 yards down the field. Will Howard completes 60% of those throws. So it felt like the worst game of the year for Ohio State's defense, the regular season Oregon game. Oregon was able to hit them over the top. It feels like Texas has to be able to do that a little bit in this game, and Golden's playing well, but I don't know if Texas can do it against this defense.
I think just again, like the structure of Ohio State's defense makes that a little more difficult now. They're playing a much different way now than they played in that first Oregon game, so that helps alleviate some of that. I think, but Golden's a good receiver. Isaiah Bond, when healthy, is very good. He really hasn't been healthy all year. And he played 22 snaps against Arizona State. He had 2 targets. He didn't have any catches, and he didn't play against Clemson. So I don't know what to expect from him. But if you're going to get a good version of Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden, like that's 2 guys that you can hurt Ohio State if it's not playing well. I think Gunnar Helm, the tight end, is maybe the most interesting. He's obviously a big target over the middle of the field. He's really good after the catch. If you look at like yards after the catch, he's quite explosive. That's where I guess like a Jordan Hancock would come into play in coverage there. I think at times Ohio State's linebackers have been a little susceptible in pass coverage, so maybe Texas tries to isolate them. I think the biggest thing is all of the shifts and the motions pre-snap, post-snap. Caleb Downs called it eye candy a couple times. He's faced this offense once before. He faced them last year when he was at Alabama. That's the stuff that Ohio State like can't let itself get stressed out over. Like they just can't let themselves get pulled out of position. I think just watching Quinn Ewers this year, I think he's clearly not 100%. I think he can't drive the ball down the field when they want to throw it deep. I think, he had an excellent throw on that 4th down in overtime against Arizona State. But I think generally his red zone passing leaves something to be desired. Again, I think that's like a velocity issue. If he's not able to really lock in on the RPO stuff that Texas wants to run and like these designer plays that Sark is awesome at drawing up, if that first read's not open, then I think Quinn can get himself into some trouble rather quickly. And I do think what Ohio State has settled on defensively in these last 2 games meshes really well with trying to stop what Texas wants to be offensively.
Okay.
So like Sark is an incredible offensive coordinator. He can scheme it up as well as anybody. He could very well have something for this matchup that Ohio State's not ready for that might allow Texas to start a little faster than we're anticipating. But if he doesn't, then I honestly think it could be pretty difficult for Texas to score in Ohio State's defense because they're not running the ball well. They ran it well against Clemson, but I said at the time, like Clemson does not have a good run defense. They played a much better run defense against Arizona State, and they couldn't run the ball. And there have been other games this year when they've played good run defense that they have not been able to run the ball. So I don't anticipate them being able to run it against Ohio State. And then it just becomes about Quinn and the receivers trying to win matchups with Ohio State's secondary. And I just think Ohio State is much better equipped to handle that now than they were in the middle of the season.
I think Arizona State's defense is pretty average, and like they did a pretty good job holding Texas down. Now, again, on Quinn Ewers, if he doesn't make a perfect 4th down, 25-yard throw down the field, we would have been spending the last 40 minutes talking about Cam Scattaboo. Like they're here because he put a throw on the money in money time. and save Texas's season. So like, we do not want to underestimate Quinn Ewers' ability, but I don't think this is a high flying offense. Anything else before we get down to business here?
No, I don't. We got all the clips. I think we're good. Red zone defense. I think I said Ohio State's number 2 in the country. Texas is 52nd. It's been like a huge bugaboo for them since Quinn has been there. It's like they have a hard time finishing drives. But they did it in clutch time against Arizona State. So it's a good offense. Like it's an offense that has like I said, like a real potential ceiling there. It's just a matter of whether or not they hit it. With the way that Ohio State's defense is playing, I would be surprised if this is the game where Texas starts to unlock all of its offensive potential.
We're going to get Arch Manning versus Julian Sayin on August 30th. Is there like, and before the playoff, we were like, they've got to go to Arch Manning if they want to win the national title. And now it just feels like Arch is that not even a discussion point? Are there any Arch vibes there at the moment?
No, I mean, the only Arch vibes I picked up on, but I thought were kind of interesting, is like when Kyle Flood, the offensive coordinator, was asked about like Quinn's like poise and ability to handle the spotlight, he chose to lump Arch into the answer with him. So does that mean like Arch is on their mind going into this game? I'm not entirely sure. I've been waiting for it, especially in the red zone, like an Arch run package. But maybe that's something Texas is sitting on, and they'll unveil in this game. But maybe not if we haven't seen it yet to this point.
It's just so weird. Arch, like, played the Mississippi State game, like played 11 snaps in the Georgia game when they benched Quinn the first time around, but like just did not play against Arizona State, played 4 snaps against Clemson, played 2 snaps against Georgia in the SEC title game, played 3 snaps against Texas A&M in the last game of the regular season. Like the last 4 games is like a non-factor. And I honestly thought he might be the starter by now. And so, and I still think maybe, again, that's partly because of you're saying like if Quinn's not quite himself from a health standpoint, I actually still think maybe Texas would have a better chance here if he was, but it's clearly not. And I don't like, this would be the game where Arch comes in for 25 plays. If there's not an injury, I don't know why we would expect that. Right.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. And I actually I don't think Quinn's played terribly. I just think he's a little limited by his injury and has one flaw in the ability to throw the deep ball. But he had some scrambles against Arizona State that I thought were pretty important, and he looked kind of fresh doing it. So he's a quarterback that needs to be in certain situations, I think, to really thrive. And I think Ohio State's defense is ready to make sure those situations don't happen.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our last break. When we come back from the break, it's going to be Tyler Shoemaker joining me and the two of us making our best bets for both semifinal games. And then when that is over, Bill and I will be back to make our picks for this game. And Landis, if you want to think of any bets that you like or whatever, we'll get your thoughts on that. But we are going to do it. Most of the time I say, we're not going to do that to this audience. We are going to do it this time. We're going to make you wait until the very end for our picks in this game. So quick break. When we come back, Tyler Shoemaker will join us on KOTN. Back on KOTN, T-Shoe, Tyler Shoemaker, Kings of the North betting analyst. Joining us now. Happy New Year, T-Shoe.
Happy New Year to you, Doug. And I mean, you don't have the way this season's gone, you should be the betting analyst and I should just be the mediator here because you 3-1 last week. I mean, what am I doing?
Well, T-Shoe, sometimes you just have one of those years where you predict the entire changing of the sport that you cover and you nail every single piece of it. And then like next year, I'm going to be like 11 and 147. So like, it's all good. You're still the analyst, math and vibes all together. Last week on the quarterfinal bets, I was 3-1. You were 2-2. like the one that was I think you had what did you have on the Ohio State Oregon game? It felt like you had sort of like right vibes, but it wasn't exactly the right bet because you had the under, and that was the Ohio State defense did completely shut Oregon down in the first half, but then like the rest of it kind of got away. But you knew where you were coming from on that under.
Yeah, I thought of you as I lost that because you often talk about having the right feel, but betting it the wrong way, and that's exactly what I did because as we even said on the show, my initial bet to you was the Oregon team total under, but because the line had moved off of 27, which is kind of a key number, I changed my bet to the game under, which again, all my analysis was right that, I felt like the Ohio State defense in particular was going to show up. I just did not see the laser show that was going to be Will Howard to Jeremiah Smith all over Oregon in the first half. So right read, wrong bet. I know a lot of people did hear the analysis and did take the Oregon team total under. So they were tweeting at me that they did cash that. So I'm happy for those people at least.
Yeah, I had the Ohio State team total over, and I hit it like in the middle of the second quarter. So I was like, I'll take this every day of the week. Bets here. I have a bet for each of these semifinals. You actually have two bets for each of these semifinals, and we'll start with Penn State, Notre Dame, where we actually are in conflict a little bit, Tishu. And if people watched our Wednesday show, I did wind up picking Penn State. It's one of those things. I actually think it's the best way to do it. To try to go into an analysis of the game without preconceived notions. And I think maybe I sort of thought, I think maybe I'm leaning Notre Dame. And then I sort of sat down to say, okay, this is all the stuff that I think matters. And then I arrived at Penn State. And so I was like, oh, okay, I guess I have to listen to myself here because it's maybe not where my gut was going to take me. But you're still kind of riding with Notre Dame. So part of my analysis here, again, this is how to try to get to the right bet on this. It feels like almost everybody that I'm talking to down here at the Orange Bowl, their scores are predicting something under the total, which is like 44.5, 45. Talking to all the sports writers down here, everybody's score is 23-20, 21-16, that kind of thing. So I think there's an under vibe, but I am specifically going with Notre Dame. And tell me what you think about this. Under 2.5 touchdowns at plus 110 is my bet for this game because last game Notre Dame scored 2 touchdowns, but it was a strip sack that shut up a short field and then a kick return. Otherwise, they kicked 3 field goals. I think they could do a similar thing. Penn State has the best red zone defense in the country in terms of fewest touchdowns allowed. I have real questions about Notre Dame moving the ball, but I like this better than a Notre Dame team total bet. I like this better than an under the overall total bet because I do think Notre Dame might kick a bunch of field goals. I just don't know that they're going to cash in the end zone. So then I'll just, all right, as long as they don't score 3 touchdowns, I don't know, they might kick 5 field goals. So under 2.5 touchdowns for Notre Dame. Before we get to the specifics, because you're a Fighting Irish, the math likes the Irish. What do you think of this kind of bet where instead of taking a number total, I'm specifically zeroing on the touchdowns? Is this smart or dumb?
I mean, I agree with your analysis, and this is one of those we talked about this last week where like my initial vibe would be kind of with you and with the general consensus here that like, okay, this is going to be a rock fight and these teams have good defenses. They want to run the ball. So that generally lends itself to lower scoring. However, again, like I said last week, when that's the general consensus and admittedly my initial kind of vibe on the game, but then I look at the numbers and they're screaming over to me. I'm like, okay, so this is where we're in conflict. My bets are going to be lean more towards Notre Dame and the overs. Yours are more Penn State and the under. But as far as how you chose to select this bet, I mean, I think getting the plus 110 on under 2.5 touchdowns versus playing the team total at, regular minus 110 or minus 115. I think that's probably the way to go. If that's your lean on the game, I think this is a smart way to do it.
Because here's the way we can both win. Because your first bet on this game is the Notre Dame team total over 22.5 at minus 115. 2 touchdowns and 3 field goals is 23. It's under my touchdowns and over your point total. Let's go Irish. Nail that 23. That makes everybody happy, which is like, I think very possible. I actually picked 16 for Notre Dame's score, but that seems A 23 this way that is a winner for both of us. Delicious, Tishu. What do you think?
Yeah, that would be ideal. So my official projection on this game, using my season long metrics as I've done, is 26-23 Notre Dame. However, the formula I mentioned last week that was saying like Ohio State, like they're, and that worked out pretty well last week. Looking at that, I would actually have Notre Dame winning, Notre Dame scoring more like 27, 28 points here. Okay. So I like this. I do think, obviously, you can't get in a coach's head, and it's a slippery slope trying to do that. But I do think both coaches know that, like, if they try to just ram the ball into the line, whatever, like they're going to put themselves at risk of losing the game, because then that makes, one explosive play for the other team swing the whole game. I think these teams are going to have to try to take some shots. I definitely think you'll see a lot of quarterback run here. I think Riley Leonard and Drew Aller are going to have to run the ball. I mean, that's been kind of the bread and butter, especially for Notre Dame. Aller not as much, but I know a lot of people in Ohio can't bet these props, but I would maybe look at some rushing props here too. I didn't give out any props because I know we have a lot of people in states that can't bet props, so I tried to be fair to everyone. But I do think if you can get some rushing total over props for these quarterbacks, I think that's probably a good way to go also.
And then let's just give you the floor on the Irish. This is it's a beautiful love story. Tyler Shoemaker and the Notre Dame football squad. You're just taking Notre Dame. So this line has been, we talked about it on the Wednesday show. It was like 1.5. It got to like 2.5 at some points. Notre Dame favored. Now it's back like at 1.5 or 1. So you think your numbers tell you Notre Dame's going to win. So one of your best bets is whatever you got to do to make a Notre Dame bet that they're going to win this game.
Yeah. I mean, who would I be to sit here after I've pounded the table for them all year and then pick Penn State here? I think Penn State's very good. Like, I don't think this is going to be easy by any means, but I just think, again, we've talked about this before. You get on a team or you get an angle and you're ahead of the market on it and you just kind of run with it. And so I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory here. If they lose, so be it. But I'm gonna dance with who brought me. So that was Notre Dame, and I'm taking the Irish here.
Just generally, when you have your math numbers that are telling you something, but there is an injury that feels like it could affect things. And Jeremiah Love, the great running back for Notre Dame, really has just not quite been himself. Doesn't sound like he's not practicing fully. Marcus Freeman says they have to be careful with him in practice. Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, said he's going to play. He's going to play. You just don't know how much he's going to play. I think only played 17 snaps in the game against Georgia. How much do you try to factor that in? Because your number, again, the math doesn't know an injury. So how does a handicapper handle something like that? Especially one of these, if Jeremiah Love was out, it's like, okay, it's black and white. Well, he's not going to play. That really affects things. This is maybe he won't quite be himself. Do you kind of just say injuries are part of the game? I'm kind of going to ignore it and just go with the numbers, or do you try to consider it?
You definitely have to consider it in your analysis. So from a betting standpoint, I think if you can bet some Jeremiah Love under rushing props, because that's like, okay, he plays, he rushes 3 times, decides he can't go, and now you cash in under easily. I think that's probably an angle worth exploring. But as far as how it affect my analysis of, Notre Dame as a team, they still have a great defense. Their defensive line's been getting after it. I've had Georgia and Penn State power rated about evenly. So even if he's just as good as he was against Georgia, which was, largely ineffective overall and banged up, Notre Dame still showed that they can find a way to win that game. So it's not like, where 10 years ago where teams just had a workhorse back and he's that guy. They've split carries all year. And again, like I mentioned, the quarterback run. So yes, while he is a very good player, and when he's, full go, that obviously is a bonus for Notre Dame. I don't think it necessarily kills them that he can't go, because Price has been good. Leonard can run it. And if they can get anything going in the passing game, I think they're going to be able to do enough offensively. Like we've talked about with Ohio State, even when you have deficiencies like Ohio State has in the offensive line, you can kind of scheme around it. And I think they can scheme around a banged up Jeremiah Love.
And they did a good job with that. Okay, let's move on to the Cotton Bowl. My bet here is a first quarter bet on Ohio State -2.5. In the first quarter, Ohio State led Tennessee 21-0. At the end of the first quarter, they led Oregon 14-0 at the end of the first quarter. To only be up by a field goal here, I'm getting Ohio State at -110. I just think this offense is in a pedal down. Let's come out and get our guys in space and attack. And I don't anticipate Ryan Day and Chip Kelly doing anything differently against Texas. Texas has the best defense that they've faced so far, but I think the Oregon defense is pretty darn good. So 21-0 to 14-0. If this is only 7-0 or 10-3 or whatever, it's not quite as dominant, but I will be surprised if Ohio State doesn't jump out here. So I'll take the Buckeyes -2.5 in the first quarter. What do you think?
Yeah, I like this. And to me, this is like, if you're deciding whether to tail this or not, it's like, okay, who do you think Ohio State is? Are they the team we saw through 12 regular season games, which was very good, but, inconsistent, especially on the offensive side? Or are they the team we've seen the last 2 games, which is a juggernaut and the team people thought they were going to be coming into the season? And I think if it's the latter, then I think this -2.5 is a no-brainer, because if they're going to continue to scheme, they've played well on both sides of the ball, but if they're going to continue to scheme it up offensively, like that first play of the game, you get G. Scott on a tight end, he pretends he's blocking, leaks out, hit him for a first down on the first play of the game. If they're going to do that, because as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, like Oregon's in trouble if this is how aggressive they're going to come out. So if that's the Ohio State team and game plan that you're going to get against Texas, I think they could roll here. So I like this first quarter bet.
And this is one of those, and actually I'm looking at it again here right now as we record on Thursday morning, and I'm seeing it at -0.5 points. So for -110 instead of -2.5. So now it's just, they just have to win the first quarter, which is probably, there probably is still a field goal. It's not that big of a difference actually between -2.5 and -0.5 in a first quarter bet. But just the idea of Ohio State starting fast, I think it's something they want to do. And I don't know that it'll be a feeling out process. And I think they have a chance to do that. One of the things with this T-shoe is when you are looking at quarter bets, halftime bets, as opposed to the game long spread, which is around 6 right now. I think there's a lot of people who believe Ohio State's going to win. And then you just get worried about like backdoor covers and that kind of thing. I feel like with quarter bets and half bets, that's not in play because nobody's giving up that early. Everyone's trying their hardest. Are there times when you like quarter and half bets more than game long bets because of that? Like why do these exist? Why am I betting this instead of just saying, oh, I think Ohio State's going to win, I'll take Ohio State -6 for the whole game?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to that. One, generally with like bigger spread games, like these week 1, week 2 games against MAC teams, like you may want to take Ohio State -27.5 in the first half against Akron or something like that versus laying 50 for the game because of what you just said. I think the other thing, and probably more importantly for me, is just the way the scoring works in football, getting key numbers. So like laying 6 with Ohio State is like, well, I don't know, but if you can get under that field goal for a quarter, like to me, that seems like a better bet just because of the way the game is scored. So for me, the key number aspect is probably the more important thing. But I definitely think, particularly in bigger spread games, garbage time becomes a factor. I don't know how much garbage time we're going to get here.
Yeah.
Although I would have said the same thing last week, and we got almost a whole half of it. So we'll see.
Okay. So one of your bets, Mike, we'll go to T-Shoe's second bet first, is Ohio State in the second half -2.5. And this is a similar strategy. We have talked a lot. Again, Ohio State's pretty good coming out of halftime. Why do you like Ohio State -2.5 in the second half at -110?
Yeah, the same thing we've been talking about for a few weeks now, that I don't know that any team in the country has been as good coming out of halftime, Michigan game notwithstanding, as Ohio State, and what the coaching staff, particularly on the defensive side, has been able to do. Once a team, I think of like the Indiana game, for instance, a team teams have had success against Ohio State early in games, not in the playoff, but through the regular season. And then it's like coming out of halftime, they just shut it all down. And I think I just have seen a bigger sample size of that than I have of the early stuff. Although, again, if you think this Ohio State team from the last 2 games is going to show up, you can take the first quarter, the first half, all of it, because I don't know that Texas is going to have much of a chance, because I think Texas's A game is nowhere near Ohio State's A game. So this just kind of affords me the cushion, if you will, of Texas having a nice game plan out of the gate, but then Ohio State doing what Ohio State does and suffocating them in the second half.
I will tell you the thing that makes me a little nervous about a bet like this is what happened in the Oregon game, which is Ohio State so good early that they put it on cruise control and they're up 34-0. They go into halftime up 34-8. They lose the second half because they kind of just shut it down. So like it's almost, there's some of this where if Ohio State's too good, there's a path to like losing this bet. So I don't.
That's fair. I think. Know? Yeah, I think if this bet loses, I think that's the path to it. I can't imagine this being a competitive game into halftime and then Texas outplaying Ohio State in the second half. Especially, and one point that I should bring up that did factor into my thinking here was, I forget. I think I heard Texas defense was on the field for 111 snaps or something like that in the Arizona State game. Obviously, they went to double overtime. I know they've got some depth on the defensive line in particular, but man, that's a lot of snaps to play and then turn around and play a week later. So I think from a freshness standpoint, like Ohio State should be able to outlast Texas, even if this is a really competitive game. I think Ohio State should be able to outlast Texas in the second half. So that definitely factored into my thinking here.
All right. And then your other bet on this game, Texas team total under 23.5. You're getting back to the thing that you got the number moved and scared you off a little bit on the Oregon game. I really like this one. Minus 115, Texas under 23.5 points. Again, I think people know this, but as much as Jeremiah Smith is getting all the deserved attention for what Ohio State is doing offensively, like I think the most impressive part of this Ohio State team right now is its defense. And I think Texas is going to have a hard time.
Yeah, I've got the Ohio State defense number 1 in my ratings, and it's by a wide margin.
Okay.
Their defensive rating for me is 7.5, meaning they'd only be expected to give up about a touchdown to the average FBS team, which is bonkers. They're the only team in the country in single digits by that rating. You got like Michigan at 10. So like Ohio State's number 1 by like a margin. And I don't even know that does justice to what they've done these last 2 games against, a decent Tennessee offense and a very good Oregon offense. I mean, the Oregon offense has been top 5 in my ratings, I think, pretty much all year. So what they've been doing defensively, combined with the fact that the Texas offense has just been shaky and, I mean, honestly, flat out bad against the best competition they've played in the 2 Georgia games and the Texas A&M game, they averaged 16 points a game. So this is me going against my season-long numbers a little bit. Season-long numbers project Texas at 24 points. However, when I factor these recent games more heavily, which, again, because of Texas's schedule, even though they were in the SEC, their schedule was not great outside they played A&M and scored 17 points. They played Georgia twice and got suffocated both games. And then they scored a bunch on Clemson, who actually has a pretty bad defense this year. And then, the Arizona State game was in the 20s before overtime. So
yeah, 24.
I have a lot of questions about the Texas offense. They haven't been able to run the ball. They ran for 1,000,000 yards against Clemson. Again, not a great defense. Against Georgia and A&M and Arizona State, they couldn't do anything on the ground. And I think if they're going to make them one-dimensional, and all the analysis from much smarter people than me of Quinn Ewers as a quarterback says that, like, if you take away his first read, like it gets real dicey and he'll just kind of chuck it somewhere and hope for the best. And if you do that against this defense, they're going to intercept the ball. They're going to get a lot of hands-on passes. And I don't know, even if Texas wins this game, it's going to have to be like 21-17. Like I don't see any scenario Texas wins a game in the high 20s or 30s against Ohio State. They don't have it offensively.
No, I agree with that. You said you had the Oregon offense. Do you have the ability to look real quick where you have the Oregon offense in your overall ratings and the Texas offense in your overall TSU
Let's see.
index?
So Oregon, even after only scoring 21 against Ohio State last week, Oregon is still number 4. Texas number 11.
Okay. And I do think that I gave a lot of credit to the Oregon offense for finding a way to do anything against Ohio State in that game. And I think there are aspects of the Oregon offense that don't exist with Texas, which includes Dylan Gabriel's ability to move around a little bit and run if he needs to. Tez Johnson. I mean, I know there's a couple receivers for Texas, but I think Tez Johnson's better than any of them. And so I think if Oregon couldn't do it, I don't think Texas is going to be able to do it. So I really like this one. Those are our bets. We'll plan to have you back before the national title game. But for now, as always, we appreciate your insight. People can find you on Twitter at TSU Index. And you got it rolling in college basketball right now. Like, you're not just a college football man, right?
Yeah, no, I pretty much do it all. We were talking before the show. I've got men's and women's college basketball going right now. Once that ends, that rolls right into WNBA season, and then WNBA takes us through the summer right back into football. So you can follow me year round. You know, if you really like to have action on a variety of sports, I'm definitely your guy. So make sure you follow me there.
TSU Index, baby. All right. Time for me and Bill Landis to make our picks for the game here on KOTN. You got any bets for us, Landis, before we make our actual picks? Like anything like a third quarter neutral? Or I don't know what is kind of some.
I'm unfortunately you can't bet here in Texas.
Yeah.
Both games I've gone to have been in states you can't wager on sports. I like the under in the Notre Dame Penn State game, 45.5, and I also like a Texas team total. But I was looking at DraftKings, and you can get Texas team total under 18.5, and that's plus 175 on DraftKings. Like a little alternate line. I would play that. Yeah.
In Florida, you can bet, but it's only through one app. It seems like it seems like a scandal. Yeah. Like, how can you have a monopoly? It's like, well, you can bet, but only through one company. It's like, oh, gee, I wonder if anybody in the government got a little side action for letting one company have all the sports betting. Ooh, I wonder. All right, you ready to make picks? Let's make picks.
Yeah, let's make picks.
I can't find I just was doing it while watching that. I cannot find a single person who's picking Texas.
I didn't see a lot of it. I've seen some Texas covers, but I haven't seen Texas outright. I haven't seen a whole lot of it. Yeah.
Literally none. Like, I look like CBSSports.com is like 9-0 for Ohio State. So I have Ohio State 34-20. What's your score?
I have Ohio State 31-17. I think if Texas wins the game, it's pretty low scoring.
Yeah. The only thing, and I'm going to do this to people, and I'm going to apologize, but I'm going to do this. 10 years ago, there was an overwhelming favorite that everybody thought was going to be the team that won the national championship among the final 4 teams. And everybody was picking Alabama as a 9 or 10 point favorite to beat Ohio State. And Ohio State won. So, like, that's the only, but that was a secretly supremely talented Ohio State team that people kind of didn't realize how good they were. And also, Alabama was playing a linebacker at quarterback that year. I don't think either of those things are true here, but I was just trying to think of, like, when was the last time in a situation like this there was such an overwhelming feeling on one side when, frankly, they're both pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, no one was giving Ohio State much of a chance to beat Georgia in 2022, right? And Ohio State didn't win that game, but it was 1 point. Ohio State was a missed field goal away from winning it. So that feels a little similar. I just don't think like the Sugar Bowl in 14 between Ohio State and Alabama was really high scoring. Obviously 42-41 against Georgia. I'm not envisioning that. I just have a really hard time seeing anybody put up that kind of number on Ohio State's defense the way it's playing right now.
Yeah. And then, of course, like, we're right on it with the total. The over-under is 53.5. My number is 54. Yours is 48. So we're like, I think everybody's pick is around something like this. Ohio State in the 30s, winning by 7 to 14 points, which is exactly where we are here. So I mean, that's the one thing everybody in college football agrees on right now, is that Ohio State is playing the best. And so here we are.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how quickly we got to that point, but Ohio State has earned it with the way it's played.
Yeah. So, and it's one other thing I realized I didn't say about the Dennis Dodd article was like Dennis Dodd was complaining that like, hey, but now people are comparing Ryan Day to John Cooper. He is John Cooper, except John Cooper never had this chance. I don't think any John Cooper comparisons prior to this year were fair for Ryan Day. This was a John Cooper Ohio State year. Supremely talented, you're supposed to win, and you lose to a bad Michigan team. That's exactly why John Cooper is remembered the way he is. And there were a million of those teams where if John Cooper had it just be in the top 12 and then take your shot, John Cooper would have a national championship. Mm-hmm. So the idea that like, why are you comparing him to John Cooper? It's because this season is a John Cooper year. They are just getting an opportunity no team in the history of the sport has ever had before. To their credit, they are taking extreme advantage of it, which is why, again, I'm talking about if they get this one done, they might do this a bunch more because I think they are actually primed to be exactly this kind of team, Landis. Like you come out of the North, you gather talent, maybe you get tripped up by a run team, a defense up there, but then you get out in the world in either warm weather or indoor stadiums in the playoff in a world where the South has come down and the North has risen up. Ohio State was built for this, which has never existed before, but they were actually also built for it in the 90s.
Yeah.
And just Coop never had the chance. So like, let's please keep that in mind. So, but the thing is, but the bottom line is, are you taking advantage of your opportunity? My God, they've played like the two best games of the season. What are the two best individual performances this season in college football? Is it Ohio State's last two games?
Yeah, I think so.
I think what they did to Oregon is the best performance by a single team all season, like no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. They took apart. They were ahead 34-0 in the first half against the undefeated number one team. But with a bunch of doubt around them, justified doubt, they also undressed the Tennessee team that like people thought was pretty talented. So like this is the best team playing the best ball at the best time to do it. Tip of the cap, but also tip of the cap to the structure that allows it to happen.
We didn't talk about this at any point in the breakdown, but we are getting for the first time this year Ohio State indoors on a fast track, presumably. Does that change your thought process on them at all? Because like it was beautiful in Pasadena, but like that's a game played on grass. Like the first game was played in real field temperatures of like 15 degrees.
Yeah. Let's Mike, can we switch my score to 48? I mean, like what are you supposed to do with that? It's like yeah. Oh, it's a track meet? Oh, good. You know who's good at track? Oh, it's Ohio State receivers. So okay, these are our picks. We'll see you guys tonight post-game after the Orange Bowl. We'll see you guys tomorrow night post-game after the Cotton Bowl, but we'll also see you tomorrow afternoon at noon, where we will do a second wrap-up of the Orange Bowl and final vibes on the Cotton Bowl before Landis gets on the bus tomorrow to go to that game. I'm going to get on the bus here in about 2 hours and head to this game. And Landis, I wish we could get everybody on the bus. What a fun thing that would be. Come on the bus with us, but I guess you can't come on the bus, but you can be part of the show. So thanks for being that, people.
Yeah. Sorry you can't come on the bus, though.
Sorry. All right. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Mike Yurstowski. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.